Flawedcast, episode 119, The Smorgasbord. The deterioration of every government begins with the decay of the principles on which it was founded. Montesquieu.
Flawedcast, get in the arena.
All right. Thank everyone, you loyal Flawedcast listeners, for tuning in to another episode. As always, we are here. I'm with my buddy, friend, compadre, Mr. Carl Tuckerson. Good morning, Carl.
Good morning, William, and how are you today?
Oh, I'm better than mud.
That's doing wonderfully.
I don't know what that means.
I would like to do something this podcast that I've never done before, if that's okay.
Sure, yeah.
I'd like to introduce right at the beginning that I would like to dedicate this to certain people. Can I do that?
This is our world, brother.
Yeah, we make it, right?
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do is the topic matter of this podcast, I would like to personally dedicate it to those friends and families of mine that 3 years ago told me at the beginning of the 2-week shutdown to curb the pandemic, which at that time was a virus, that things were going to get back to normal. And they're still proclaiming 3 years later that eventually things are going to get back to normal. I would like to dedicate this podcast to you.
All right. Well, this one's going out number one with the bullet, I think. And before we get deeper into what Carl means, we just want to do the shake and howdy, and we want to ask you to continue to share and subscribe. For some reason, this last episode is not on Apple, and I don't know why. I'm trying to find out. Hopefully, by the time this is out, you'll be able to hear it on Apple. But normally, we're available on Apple, Google Play, Breaker, Spotify. We are on Rumble under Flawed Inc., and we have been miraculously reinstated on YouTube. So as of right now, we are on YouTube, which, okay, that's great, I guess. But I'm not expecting to be there very long.
It's probably a brief resurrection, I'm assuming.
Yeah, they're saying, okay, how fast can these two
screw up again?
Right, yeah. Anyway, so make sure that you follow us and share on the Project Mockingbird social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We are on Parler. We are on Gab. And we are on Getter, which, by the way, in the last 3 days, we've gotten like 30-some new followers on Getter. So and that's under Flawed. So if you're one of our new listeners and you found us on Getter, thank you. We appreciate them. Yeah. As always, copy my book, Smith's Heart of Man Repair Manual, coming up on the 1-year anniversary. I actually spent some time working on my new book again this week. I'm excited about it. And times are tough. Purse strings are getting drawn tighter and tighter. I want to just sow into people and bless people. So if you want a copy, no shade, email us at Flawed Inc. CLE, and that's Inc. with a K, Flawed Inc. CLE at gmail.com. And if you have any show tips or if you have any questions, concerns, or complaints, you can email us there too. Just direct those to Carl. And
yeah, it'd probably be my fault anyway.
So, that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Tuckerson here.
All right, everyone, let's take your right hand, place it over your left heart, and repeat after us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Carl, why don't you elaborate on your dedication?
Yeah, I really wish that you and I didn't have to be the two puds to deal with this topic.
Well, welcome to my world.
I mean, but we are, and we will, and we'll do it valiantly. But what I want to say briefly is, I remember sitting in the garage in the evening, watching the deer, listening to the birds, and all of the other wildlife that roams on the property.
That sounds tranquil.
It was relaxing.
Yeah.
And I remember my wife walking into the garage with a nice cup of coffee. And she says, oh, by the way, and this was 2.5 years ago. Okay. There's a shortage right now of something that I think you may find hilarious. And I said, what's that? And she said, toilet paper. I spit my coffee out all over myself after I said, "What's that?"
Was that the desired effect, you think?
I don't know because, well, first of all, it was true.
Right.
And I had not been made aware that because there was a virus that you were going to have to start defecating more than normal or that you were affected with that. I thought maybe it was like the flu and maybe you would get a case of diarrhea or something. I don't know. At the time, because it was new to me, because, we live in America.
Right.
So we used to have transportation for things. The grocery shelf used to have groceries and whatever. So
You used to be able to fill up your car tank without having to take out a line of credit on your house.
Yeah, I mean, crazy, right?
Right.
But so it began then, and I think the nation was being prepared. So it began the information that Karen would give me, that is my wife, about shortages. Maybe a couple of weeks later, it was spices. Okay, cooking spices. Mm-hmm. The inconsequentials, the no big deals, right?
Right. There's always going to be salt. There's always going to be toilet paper. There's, so on and so forth.
Yeah, and it grew. But I wasn't even aware until most recently of one shortage that I find very serious, and so do many parents, and that's baby formula. And I want to tell you why. I am a recent grandfather. My granddaughter is now 15 months old. So this hits me because the struggles that my daughter had in finding the right formula for her system to digest, okay? So this was a struggle in and of itself, finding the proper formula. She was struggling with her digestive system. She had to go to the doctors. And so this was an ongoing thing. This was a struggle. I thought, as far as baby formulas go, that was about as serious as the baby formula issue would be, is that the infant had to find the right one. And unfortunately for my daughter at the time, it was the most expensive formula that you could buy that she had to settle on. What would have I done as a grandfather if my daughter would have came to me and the problem wasn't that I have to buy the most expensive formula, Dad, can you help me? Sure, honey, here's a few bucks. What if it was her, Dad, there is no formula? And so when I visualized that, I was affected in a way that said we've went from toilet paper and we've went from spices and we've went from other inconsequentials that people just laughed at. And now we're sitting here at the most innocent and vulnerable among us, which are infants that totally depend on parents for existence. And we, as a country, totally depend on governmental officials to provide certain things to us to give the parental protection to these children. And now parents, according to the Washington Post article from May 12th, are confronted in many situations with giving cow milk, which babies cannot digest, according to this article. And I want people to go read it.
Share the name of it.
I don't have it with me.
Okay. Well, we'll make sure you give me a link and we'll post it below.
I will do that.
We don't want to just spout out
correct.
Nonsense, because this is a thing.
This is real.
Yeah.
And usually the Washington Post paper is worth wiping your butt because of the toilet paper shortage. But in this situation, they covered it. So I wanted to use it because most of the people will make reference to the Washington Post as God when it comes to reciting sources.
Right. They're part of the mainstream media.
Correct.
And somehow,
on both sides.
Right. And somehow their legitimacy or their name offers some kind of legitimacy that, it's like saying, oh, this person's a Republican, so they have the same values that I do.
Correct.
Which is utter buckus.
Correct. But it made reference to a special mother, and she had to make the decision because she couldn't provide formula. She had to put a tube intravenously feeding her infant so that her infant wouldn't die. No longer is this funny. No longer is this toilet paper. It's not cereal. It's not spices. It's baby formula. It is a generation that's coming up behind us to live their life in this great country that is being confronted with food shortage.
I do have an article actually here. It says, before there were baby formula shortages, Bill Gates' black lab grows breast milk. So I don't want to interrupt your thing. I just want to let you know that we're going into very complex issues. Okay, and I think this is, if I can speak for you as well.
You can.
You have to be more discerning and more conscious than just to think all of a sudden out of the blue there's a 48% shortage of baby formula for what we statistically need through this country.
Correct. And just to make a point of interjection is that it is 48% as of last week. The general average of shortage is between 2 and 8%. That's acceptable, and that's where, as a country, we have been traditionally is at 2 to 8%, and now we've elevated to the 48% and going higher.
Right. A nationwide shortage in baby formula in the U.S. is making its way into Canada as parents begin to panic buy, which is causing emptier store shelves, leaving a very worrying trend for new moms. This comes in the wake of the FDA shutting down Abbott Laboratories, a baby formula manufacturer who says that they are safe and they are not, in capitals, responsible for what the FDA claims. But despite an investigation that concluded, the FDA shut them down 3 months ago, to which the effects are now being felt. The FDA overstepping? I don't know. Do they have a trend of doing that? I don't know. Meanwhile, the lead up to all this is happening that Bill Gates was funding and backing a company called BioMilk with a Q, a biotech company which is developing lab-grown breast milk. And Dan Hicks for Press for Truth looks at the factors that are causing the baby formula shortages and how Bill Gates is funding a solution for all this, while also pointing out that there is a global food shortage looming and how Bill Gates is the largest private owner of farmland in the U.S. Coincidence? So there's that article. Please continue. I just wanted to share. You're talking about the Washington Post, but there's also, this is from an organization in Canada. It's called dailynewsbreak.org. They're out of Canada, but I have read some of their articles.
I like how they end that with one word, coincidence, with a question mark after it,
right.
Because would it also be a coincidence that somehow Bill Gates was able to send a sequence of the virus breakdown that had just came out, just been released, or however you want to say that it came out, and had people that were already producing a vaccine to be given because of the viral sequence breakdown of the pandemic? And it's amazing that it just seems like this guy is one step ahead of every disaster and one step behind with the solution.
Coincidence?
Coincidences on everything. Let's be honest. Can we do that?
I think we try, but let's continue.
He's a computer geek. He created Microsoft.
He stole the idea from Microsoft.
He is a computer geek and nerd. That is what he is. But somehow, and we all know it's because of money and power, he's elevated himself into a specialist on viruses and vaccines, on chemically altered milk and food shortages, on global food shortages, on financial shortage, on financial gain, on world economies. There's not a topic that this guy doesn't know. And now he makes the Ponderosa look like a little backyard because of the way he has all this farmland. And Bill, what is growing as far as food on that farm, on all the thousands and hundreds of thousands of acres that this guy owns? How much food is he growing on that farm?
Nothing.
There you go. So again, it begs to question, is it a coincidence?
I don't know. I'm going to reserve my answer for either a later time in this episode, or maybe just let the listeners think.
I think the listeners need to try and think on that and figure it out. I mean, we just present the truth here.
I mean, at some point, and I've had some really interesting conversations with people this week, but at some point, we have to just stop these delusions and just look at reality and face the facts. And I have another article I could read, but I don't want to interrupt your flow because I know that you have some other things to discuss. But I'm just going to give you the headline of this. And this is something you and I have been talking about. And actually something that happened in a location right not too far from the Flawedcast World headquarters. But food processing plants have been catching on fire. Here's why. Just that, again, let me just read this. It says, food processing plants have been catching on fire. Here's why. There's a weird trend going around, and it isn't the new TikTok dance, but rather food processing plants catching on fire. Since the beginning of this year, 2022, there have been high numbers of food distribution and processing facilities catching on fire and creating massive damage. Why are so many food processing plants catching on fire? Social media and Twitter in particular are drawing attention to the trend occurring in numerous food processing plants. They are catching on fire. While some of them have been able to bounce back, others have been stuck trying to rebuild and resume distributing foods, even laying off employees. And they give a couple examples of these things. Recently, a plane crashed into a potato and food processing plant in Idaho, according to the Idaho Statesman. The plane hit the Gem State processing plant located in Hayburn, which is east of Idaho. Here's another example. Azure Standard is an independently owned company that specializes in natural and non-GMO foods. On April 19th, the company released a statement that its headquarters were destroyed by an overnight fire. Here's another example. On April 12th, Taylor Farms processing facilities in Salinas, California, which is one of the largest in the country, by the way, also experienced an overnight fire that prompted evacuations after concerns were raised about on-site ammonia storage exploding. According to ABC7, there were 35,000 gallons of ammonia stored at the facility. Nearly 85 to 95% of the buildings, which are about 225,000 square feet, have completely lost to fire. The cause of the fire is still under investigation. Here's another one. On February 22nd, Newsweek reported that several employees were sent to the hospital after an explosion occurred at Shearer's Food, a food processing facility located in Hermiston, Oregon. The plant is one of the largest employers in that area and employs about 400 people. It looks like everything is indicating that it's going to be a total big loss, stated Byron Smith, the Hermiston County city manager. So, let me see. Here's another one. In North Carolina on February 1st, evacuations issued after a fertilizer plant caught on fire. Winston Weaver Company was the home of the plant and located near northern Winston-Salem. The fire started overnight, and many people nearby saw its bright orange flames light up the sky. Food and water shortages have been a theme since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. People ventured into stores to find low supply of everything from food to regular household supplies. So there's like 5 or 6 examples, and just literally like 2 or 3 weeks ago, right down the street, there was a fertilizer manufacturer that mysteriously caught on fire. At what point, like the example with Bill Gates,
right?
At what point do you have to just step back and say, hey, this place in Oregon caught on fire and they're all overnight.
Six cases and 5 certain fires overnight. It doesn't really say if the other one where there was an explosion and actually employees were there. I don't remember that being referred to as overnight, but 5 out of 6, again, that's not a coincidence.
It can't be.
And the fertilizer plant.
Right. Well, and here's the thing with fertilizer, for going back to Bill Gates being the largest owner of farmland in the continental United States, not growing anything. There are other farms that are. If you eliminate the product they produce, you're already increasing food shortages. However, if fertilizer, which here's another thing people refuse to look at, that Russia is the second largest exporter of fertilizer in the world, and now there's global embargoes on them, and you have these food manufacturing places, you have these fertilizer manufacturing places mysteriously, not even want to say mysteriously, catching on fire, blowing up, whatever. There's already a shortage. There's that shortage being increased And at some point, when do we just say, and you're paying $9 or $10 for a watermelon?
Well, yeah, a shortage increase means a price increase. Supply and demand. You do two things. You eliminate the availability and you increase the price. So every way you turn and everywhere you turn, whether it's the dinner table or your pocketbook, you're being hit and attacked.
You want another one?
Yeah, sure. Why stop now?
With gas prices at an all-time high, Biden decides to cancel oil and gas lease sales in Alaska and in the Gulf of Mexico. Where are two places in the U.S. that produces a lot of oil? Alaska, the Gulf of Mexico, Texas, all throughout there. And Biden has stopped the sales lease on drilling for oil in those places. Only a few days ago, we reported that gas prices in the U.S. reached another all-time high. This impacts the pocketbooks of average Americans across the country. Americans were already facing all-time highs in inflation and some measurements, and now this. I'm going to read a quote. It says, "The Interior Department will not move forward with planned oil and gas lease sales in the Gulf of Mexico and Alaska, and Alaska's Cook Inlet introduced this Wednesday night. A spokesperson from the department confirmed that Cook Inlet lease sale would not proceed due to the insufficient industry interest."
Yeah, right.
Insufficient industry interest in gasoline. Okay. Meanwhile, the planned sale of two leases, Lease 259 and Lease 261, the Gulf of Mexico, will not proceed due to contradictory court rulings on the leases, the spokesperson confirmed. And there's other quotes. I'll put the links in the bio of the episode, but are you starting to get the picture? And Carl, if you can, would you kindly explain the idea of calling this episode the Smorgasbord?
I sure will. The reason is because anytime you go to a buffet or a smorgasbord, you have so many choices to pick and choose from to put on your plate. And you and I decided earlier in the week that there is so much going on and there are so many opportunities for us to glean from, to choose from, that are problematic, that can't just be coincidence because they're showing up all at the same time and never dealt with or seen before. And I'd like to make a reference real quick to this leasing of land.
Have at it.
I did some reading and studying. What I found out, the government, I'm saying, in this Biden administration, they're just blatantly coming out and showing that they just don't want oil. What they were doing before was pretty ingenious. They were issuing record number of leases for oil companies to have land, but they were issuing no permits for exploratory drilling. And the oil companies were explaining that leasing property and having land is useless if you can't get a permit to explore, to tap into where the oil is. In other words, you're not going to take all of the big rigs, you're not going to take all the drilling equipment, you're not going to take the expensive machinery and set up to drill if there's no oil in that spot. So the government was releasing all these land opportunities. So the government was saying, and Biden just made reference the other day when he was giving his press conference, blaming the ultra mega Republicans for the problems.
And what does that even mean? I mean,
it doesn't exist. It's just a new term that some genius made up that he's now buying into. But it wasn't his administration. During that press conference, you can go back and listen to it. It was last week. He literally said that the problem with gases is because these oil companies are not fulfilling their responsibility on the land the government has leased to them, and they're not drilling. Well, they're not going to drill, Mr. Biden, until you give them the permits to explore with the less expensive drilling technique to find out where the oil is. So you have all of this land. You have all of these oil companies that are leasing this property, and time is running out until the lease is up, but they can't get the permits to go in and to explore where the oil is. So this land and this lease is just sitting there. It's ridiculous, and it is not unintentional, and it is not an accident.
Well, and even what you're talking about with oil is a business, big business, but, you know, the difference between exploratory versus just full bore, hey, we found something going. So it's a cost
Yes.
And if they're saying you can't explore,
correct,
you have to go full bore, where if
just drop the drill.
Well, basically it just means we are trying to bankrupt natural gas and natural ways to create energy to try to kneecap everyone. And it's, I had so many articles. Even I had an article about the roaming blackouts and about the energy crisis that's coming. We saw some of that last winter in Texas, where a bunch of people passed away because they tried to go all green, which is good in theory, and I applaud in theory, but in practicality is insufficient, and there is no model right now. And whether it be a combination of solar and wind or even hydroponic energy, which I'm a huge fan of, it just is not sufficient enough to meet the need. But they're trying to kneecap it and put these companies out of business, because if they can control the power, when they control the power, they're going to have more control over us. When they control the food, they have more control over us. Something else I wanted to read, if you don't mind, Mr. Tuckerson. And this is an article from the Wall Street Journal. We're going to be talking about China.
Yeah, good.
China. And I want to point something out to people. We need to start harnessing the power of our memory, whether there's some kind of roots or fruits or whatever it is. We need to really start getting onto it, because if we remember, and I'm sure you do, that before the quote-unquote lockdowns came here, before people were deemed essential or non-essential, before people lost their livelihoods, their businesses, their trades, before suicides and mental illness skyrocketed to a point where they can't really even keep accurate numbers on it, when drug and alcohol abuse skyrocketed,
domestic violence skyrocketed.
Yes, which are things that are there, but the mainstream media doesn't want to talk about because it doesn't support their narrative. So I just want to refresh people's memory. Once again, this is from the Wall Street Journal. Shanghai lockdown reignites supply chain problems for U.S. companies. Apple, GE, Estee Lauder are among the disrupted businesses. Some warn of effect extending into summer. That's the subheadline. It says some U.S. companies are warning that COVID-19 lockdowns in Shanghai and elsewhere in China are denting sales, disrupting operations, and putting added strain on supply chains that could be felt well into the summer. So everything these people do, they're warning you. Like, people ask, well, how do you know what's going to happen? How does this particular podcast have such a high success rate of being able to call what's going to happen? Because they're telling you.
Sure.
They're telling us right now, there's going to be shortages, not just on food. And I'm going to get into other things in a moment. Apple Inc. said it could take a sales hit of as much as $8 billion in its first quarter, primarily because of the Shanghai lockdowns. Industrial giant Honeywell International said that COVID measures have curbed production at half of the Chinese plants. JB Hunt Transport Services, and you'll see a lot of those semi-trucks driving, said that freight carriers' customers are worried about deliveries scheduled into July. And the article goes on and on. I'll put a link below. But the primary things they're pointing out here are technology and transportation. And interestingly enough, and I didn't have time to really include articles, but what my studying has showed me is the trend is right now, we are going to have a huge shortage of microchips. In addition to that, there is already a huge shortage of diesel fuel. Now, on the onset, one might just think, well, who cares about microchips? Who cares about diesel? Well, you don't own anything. And when I say anything, I literally mean anything. You don't own a refrigerator. You don't own a coffee machine. You don't own a phone. You don't own a computer. A newer car. You do not own anything that does not have microchips and require microchips to function.
Correct.
In addition to that, if you do not have diesel fuel to supply truckers and trucking companies to deliver food, goods, manufacturing supplies, so on and so forth, the country is literally going to shut down.
I'm going to tell you something. Most people don't think that way, and it's the only way that I think. So, knowing that most of the people that I love and that I know, most of the people that I don't know that I meet and then have to deal with business and other things, they don't think like me. I only think the way I think about these types of things, so I see impending doom and destruction coming.
this may or may not be a secret, but Carl and I actually work at the same place. And one of the things that we are discovering is that the industry that we're in, there are significant, how do I want to say this? You may think that, it's hard to find food, but, we work in the trades. Technically, Carl does more than I do, but there's people that are waiting months to get windows, to get cabinets, to get countertops, to get appliances, for the particular trade that we are involved in. There is a huge deficit of what we need in order to do what we do.
Our product line is destroyed.
100%.
It's unavailable.
And even we try to stick to one primary.
Correct.
Even competitors.
Correct.
Are in the same exact situation.
Correct. And the people's homes that I enter into every week, that I'm around, that I deal with and develop relationships with, most of them work at home. And I can tell you this, it isn't just our industry. Every single customer, every single job, every single industry, the struggles that they are having to supply their consumers and their customers with the products that are necessary are causing them stress. Worst of all, it's actually jeopardizing their whole industry, which means that they're jeopardizing their job, their career, their income. So these people are stressed, they're worried, they're panicked, they have anxiety, they have fear, and they're twisting and turning all of that against the people that are in their home working on a regular occasion. The people, and I told you before this podcast, I've been in this industry since the late 80s, early 90s. I've never seen the populace as a whole so belligerent, angry, aggressive, dissatisfied about anything, so they're going to take it out on you. You have to bend over backwards. You have to do free stuff. You have to appease. You have to use psychology, sociology, and every kind of ology that you can think of to just get the job done. I've never seen in America the customer or consumer base so crazy as it is now.
It's like a fever pitch.
It's a trickle-down effect.
Right. So for me, what I want to point to, and I had a really interesting conversation with someone this week, and I hope I can have a few moments, because Carl is the one that observed this. This week I was just like, I'm like, I really need you, God.
Yeah.
I had a conversation this week with a listener, and if they're listening, I want you to know sincerely, I think you're great. But we had this elongated conversation, and there is this belief amongst a lot of people, and I've been called a conspiracy theorist more times than I can remember, and that's fine. That is somebody who actually kind of looks at all the angles and tries to tabulate their own thought process or their own take on things. So I'll take that as a compliment. But there's a difference between using the intuition and being guided by the Lord to see what's really going on and prepare yourself versus just living in this weird sublime state of suspended euphoria that is not going to happen. And I'm just going to say this right now. I know there's a lot of people that are looking to the midterms that think there's going to be this red wave. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And if it does happen, the Republicans are as feckless and worthless as the Democrats. And if you're looking at things along those lines, you have missed the point. Donald Trump is not the Messiah. Donald Trump has no more power than you or I, Carl, meaning that he's a civilian. He has a man. He has one vote. Now, he has more resources than you and I. He can purchase influence, which could be looked at as power. But when it comes down to it, he is not, the Messiah. He is not the Savior. He is not in cahoots with other world powers. There is not this secret military coup that's going to happen between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. It's just not going to happen. Things that Carl and I are pointing out to you right now are things that Jesus himself discusses in the other eschatological books, the books that discuss the days that we're living in the scriptures, that are referring to the things that we have been talking about. They have been talking about famines. They have been talking about shortages. And once again, and I'm not trying to be away, so I apologize if it comes across this way, Carl, but knowing you as well as I do, knowing if your granddaughter is not able to eat, knowing the man that you are, that's not going to stand.
Correct.
Now, magnify that on a national level. That's a problem that is just waiting to happen. The crime statistics across America, the big metropolises, are just out of control. They're so out of control that officers and law enforcement, they're not even bothering anymore.
Correct.
We are in a time of lawlessness. Just Thursday, there was a 4.3 earthquake right off the shore of Lake Erie, where we live in the Cleveland area. Earthquakes don't happen here. Christ, once again, in Matthew 24, talks about, earthquakes and these things. And all of these things are happening right now. And you even had a verse, and I forgot the name, what the address was, but it was talking about, covered it before.
I think it's also in Matthew.
Yeah, Matthew 24, where
I believe so.
Basically says, woe to new mothers or mothers who are nursing
Correct.
in those days. And that's a direct correlation to what we're talking about when
Correct.
there is a shortage. And it's not like you and I say, hey, I don't want a salad tonight. I'd rather have a burger. Infants and children, they can only have certain things because they are not developed.
Correct.
Listen, if I have to break this down to you, they have not been developed and tested by life yet. They are in the purest, most unformed shape that they are, and they need, mother's milk. They need this specially formulated formula in order to sustain life.
To digest it.
To
properly.
digest it. Thank
Right.
you. And, the correlation that he and I made earlier this week is like, now that this whole Roe v. Wade thing is happening, which, by the way, my new take on it is they've been playing the race card for so many years. They've been playing the class warfare card for so many years with the upcoming midterm elections. They need to put another divisive thing in the place. And looking into this, it's not eradicating abortion. It's putting it back into the states' rights, which on a more constitutional level, I agree with, although the principle of abortion I abhor. I think it's murder. But nonetheless, it's the spirit that we are talking about that is literally, if they're not going to kill them in the womb, if people have decided to, I am going to birth and bring forth the life that God has breathed his holy breath onto, bring it to this world. If they can't kill them before they're out of the womb, they're going to start to dissect them and pick them off in this manner outside of the womb. And listen, you can think I'm crazy. That's fine. But I'm seeing what I'm seeing. I know Carl's seeing what he's seeing. And this is the fact. If you're putting your hope in a political figure, if you're putting your hope in a political party, if you're putting your hope in a celebrity, if you're putting your hope into a movement, I'm sorry, but your hope is on surface level great, but it is misplaced hope. Your hope right now has to be in Christ, his returning, and the principles in which he has instructed us to live. And I think I'm so proud of our last episode that just came out. I really want to encourage people to listen to it and put those principles into use, into a practical use in your life. And I'm just going to shut up and let you finish. But people, you got dozens and dozens of food manufacturing plants across the United States, literally from coast to coast, catching on fire. By and large, there's no explanation. That's not a coincidence. You have a nearly 48% deficiency in baby formula. It just can't be a coincidence. Like, they're locking down again in China, which, manufactures most everything that we use. We have like these big companies, Apple and Estee Lauder and JB Hunt, all these they're saying, hey, there's going to be shortages. You need to prepare. And how I would suggest preparing is this: getting right with God, learning the laws of the land. If you're in a position where if you're in a high capacity city, like a big metropolis, move, if at all possible, but try to become as self-sustainable as you can. We see they're controlling the ability to transport items and to transport yourself, and also they're going to try to starve you. They're trying to put you under their control. This is all part of this demonic forerunning spirit that we've been talking about that is literally ushering in the man of lawlessness for the hour that we are living in. And I can't see it any other way. So if you have something to say, please share it.
Sure. I would like to say this: misplaced hope leads to losing hope. Misguided hope leads to giving up. Without hope, you have nothing. So people are looking to things and events into the future and they're depending on that, and that is their hope. Well, when the revelation comes to them that they've misplaced their hope, that it was misguided because that never happened, eventually the hope that has kept them going, the hope that has caused them to continue to fight, it leaves. And those ruling over us know that if you can get a person to give up hope, they give up. I have good news. I myself can only speak for myself. I will never give up hope. And the reason is because my hope is placed in Jesus. Everything that is happening right now, currently, he let us know was going to happen. He told us. So when he was speaking about wars and rumors of wars, and when he was speaking about famines and diseases and pestilences, which we're dealing with, when he was speaking about the love of many growing cold, and when he was saying woe to the mothers that have infants that are giving milk and that are nursing, none of those things were happening. Mm-hmm. The news to every listener on this podcast is every one of those things are happening now. Not right. One reference to what was going to happen right before his return is not happening. Every one of them. The only thing that has not happened is the revealing of the Antichrist in person, not the spirit. That's been revealed for years in the court systems and through politicians and through Hollywood. And we've seen the spirit that has revealed itself. But there's coming a day where the man himself, the Antichrist, will have the releasing and the showing up. And then the only other thing besides that is the return of Jesus. That is where my hope is. And Bill, that is why I will never give up hope. I don't have misguided or misplaced hope. My hope is in knowing this. We are eternal beings. There is a part of us that is our spirit and our soul that lives forever. We have the ability to make a decision and to choose where we want our spirit to be. And when we decide that we want to spend eternity in heaven with Jesus, we accept him as our Savior, and I have done that. I have invited him into my heart. I have asked him to forgive me for my sins. My hope is in him. It is not in a politician or a military coup or some red wave or anything else. That is where my hope is, and I am petitioning anyone that is listening that feels like your hope is misguided or misplaced. If you have not considered to place your hope in Jesus for your future, and I mean long-term, I mean eternal, make that decision today. It is not complicated, and it is not hard. In fact, some would say it's too simple, but it's really not. You just simply open yourself up and say, please forgive me for my sins. I know that I am a sinful person. I am sorry. I want you to come into my life. I want to put my hope in you. And it is that simple. And so you and I, we've done that. And we will continue to sit behind these microphones, and we will continue to bring stuff to people as long as we have that opportunity. And we will never give up hope because we have properly placed our hope.
100%. So I want to thank everybody for listening. And I love how you just ended that, because that is the most important thing of anything we've ever said.
Sure is.
Of all 100, and I think there's 122 episodes in total, but that's the single most important thing.
It's the lowest common denominator,
right?
Like we bring out.
And if there wasn't a plan in action, and there wasn't a system that was going to be put in place at some time, we would not have been told. We would not have been warned about it. And once again, our last couple episodes, there's been a big focus on not being speculative, but being actual. This is happening right now. Once again, I'm going to say it. A lot of churches aren't going to talk to you about these things. I don't know why. I'm not going to speak for that right now, but we are. That's our call. That's what our mission is. And these things are happening. And please look up and see what's happening. Please don't take our word on it. Do some research. And certainly one thing you don't want to just take our word on, although we haven't and won't lie to you, is what the actual Bible says. Literally, when Jesus is talking, woe to mothers who are nursing.
Couldn't have been more accurate.
And it's not just, woe to if you're a mom, because with a newborn, because that's a hard thing. But nursing mothers is a specific time frame in a child's life, and he could have, anywhere.
And it only lasts a year, Bill. That's the amazing thing.
Exactly.
It's the first year.
Exactly.
Amazing.
So please, just be aware. And please also share, subscribe. We're anywhere you can listen to podcasts, Flawedcast CLE. We're on Apple, Google Play, Spotify, Breaker. That's at Flawedcast CLE. We're on Rumble under Flawed Inc. You may be listening on YouTube. That's under Flawed Inc. If you are, awesome. If you're not, hopefully you listen to one of the other places. You can find us on the Project Mockingbird social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Doing well on Getter, doing well on Parler, doing well on Gab. Get a copy of my book, Smith's Art of Man Repair Manual. Link is below. I will also try to put the other links for the articles that we shared this week. But to quote the late, great Curtis Mayfield, people get ready. There's a train a-coming.